Welcome, friends. My name is Sally Carlin, and I'm the English Language Arts Facilitator for South Bend Schools. Thank you for joining this conversation on running records, the first of the 2018-19 recorded professional learning sessions. The handouts you'll need by your side during this training are Stephanie's unanalyzed running record, the packet on how to take running records, the transcript of the Little Red Hen, Stephanie's analyzed running record, and the reading strategies checklist. Finally, I've included a blank running record form to use on your own, but we won't use that during this session. These are all uploaded on the Google form, so if you don't have them, take a moment, stop this recording, and print those. Another thing you'll want to do is open the YouTube videos that are linked on the Google form. They will take us to Diane Lauer's 3 brief running record tutorials, parts 1, 2, and 3. So you'll want my recorded session opened, and in order, all 3 YouTube videos, so 4 tabs total. Okay, let's get started. Our purpose today is to grow in shared understanding and begin a dialogue around running records. What is a running record? Why should we do them? How do we take a running record and score it afterward? How do we analyze a running record and learn from it? And finally, we'll think about our own personal next steps as far as running records go. Even though many of us will be completing this training alone, there are still norms that will make the learning more fruitful. First off, it is always important that we take an inquiry stance. We all have a personal next step, so it's important to be open to it. Another important norm is assuming positive intent. The intent of this training is to empower teachers, to give every teacher a tool to sharpen his or her observation, to make teachers expert and on par with any tech-related assessment out there. So, what is a running record exactly? A running record is a standardized tool for coding and scoring a student's reading of a text and for analyzing reading behaviors after the fact. It's a way to capture a student's oral reading and the behaviors associated with that reading, from laughter during the text reading to pointing, to how fluently the student read, to what the student's eyes did, like looking at the pictures. You write as much down as you can. There are many purposes for taking a running record, like placing students in reading groups, finding appropriate reading levels, and deciding if the level that you have a group at is currently where they're at, for improving your instruction, for capturing reading behaviors for later analysis, to keep a record over time, and for providing information to parents and other teachers. So there are many reasons to take a running record, but do these reasons apply equally to every student? Who gets a running record and how often? Let's talk about that. For emergent readers, for those typical readers in kindergarten, first, and second grade, you take running records often. In kindergarten, about every 2 weeks, you should have a running record on everybody in your class once guided reading is in place. I hear from kindergarten teachers all the time that running records will make their students nervous. And I gotta say, that doesn't actually fit my experience with taking running records with kindergarten students. Often students don't even know at this level that you've taken a running record. You can have your clipboard off to the side, paying attention to their one-on-one, to how well they point below text, to their memory for text, to their use of the pictures. And you can take a running record on a Post-it note even. You can also just pay attention to their reading and transfer those reading behaviors later to your record-keeping binder. But in kindergarten, everybody gets running records once guided reading is in place. And if you shoot for doing 2 running records a day, you'll get to your whole class about every 2 weeks. In first grade, it's the same. Kids are just emerging as readers. And if you look at your class every 2 weeks while kids are acquiring early reading behaviors and strategies, you'll be able to instruct them better. You'll be able to guide them better as they're moving along as emergent readers. Even if a student is on grade level reading, they still need a running record about every 2 weeks in first grade because What you're doing then as a teacher is looking for the emergence of fluency and expression. You're wanting to have a conversation with them after the fact about the story. All of these strategies, the ability to think within a text, about a text, and beyond a text, all of these strategies are working and coordinating in first grade, and biweekly running records matter. In second grade, again, we have an incredible number of emergent readers even in second grade. So every 2 weeks, students are developing fluency. Now, with fluent, comprehending, above level readers in second grade, you can take them less frequently, like maybe once a month. Another group to consider, other than emergent readers, are below level readers. Below level readers at all grade levels need frequent running records. So students who read at the level of a kindergarten first and second grade student, even if they aren't in K1 or 2, they need running records regularly, about every 2 weeks. With on-level readers in grades 3 through 5, you need benchmarking running records at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. I would argue you don't need those running records in order to begin your reading groups at the beginning of the year. You could use NWEA to rank order your students. But once you've got guided reading up and going, you're going to be taking running records on the text you introduced the day before, and you can use that as benchmarking, even though it's not a cold read, as a way at the beginning of the year to get a sense of how your students read, beginning of the year. And then you'll want to take another set of running records, middle of year and end of year. And throughout the year, even if you're a fifth grade teacher, if you have questions, I would do a quick running record or text reading probe. So just a snippet of a shorter running record, maybe 100 words, so that you can easily figure out an accuracy percentage. So running records are an important tool for every teacher, kindergarten through fifth grade, for emergent readers, for below-level readers, and in terms of benchmarking for on-level readers 3 through 5. So running records take a commitment, even in the upper elementary grades. Are they worth it? Let's consider Stephanie's unanalyzed running record for a moment. So pull that out. Later, we'll fully analyze this running record. But for now, let's just look quickly at it and see what it can tell us about Stephanie. So take that unanalyzed running record out for a minute and imagine that you're part of a GEIT meeting and the classroom teacher cannot be there. But you have his guided reading binder with this running record. What could you say to the parent after only glancing at it for a minute? Let me just share some thoughts with you. So first off, if I were part of that GEIT team, I would look at the scoring at the top. The accuracy percentage on this running record is a 74%. So this text was at the frustration level for Stephanie. This is a level E text, a middle of first grade level, and Stephanie is a first grader. So she struggled with this grade level text, yet her fluency is a 3 on a 4-point scale, with a 1 being horrible word by word reading, and a 4 being lovely performance level reading. So Stephanie was a 3, mostly good reading. She's doing all right in terms of fluency. She read at an acceptable pace and tone, yet the text was too difficult in terms of her accuracy. This suggests to us that Stephanie is not monitoring well. She is just using her strong oral language and memory, relying on oral language and memory for text to pick up on the pattern and tell the story. I also see the 2 out of 3 on the retelling. So Stephanie understood the storyline pretty well as she was marching along telling this story, but she was not monitoring. I have an image of Stephanie as one of those first graders who was reluctant at the start to do the work of gluing to print and word solving. So Stephanie is falling back on her oral language and memory. We are at an important juncture with Stephanie. The teacher and parents need to be watching her closely to be sure she starts to apply some of the phonics skills that she knows. Now we're going to analyze the whole running record later, Stephanie's running record. But for now, in terms of strategy use, I'll just say at a glance that there is no evidence on this running record of working through words, of taking words apart. Stephanie appears to either know the word or she doesn't know the word. And so I know that Stephanie needs work on taking words apart. So she would benefit by writing every day. This would force Stephanie to slow down and stretch the sounds in words as she attempts to work through words in printing her messages. And that would transfer powerfully to her reading. So I would suggest to the parent in GEIT, hey, let's meet, my suggestion is we meet again in another month, but you work on writing one sentence per night and let her stretch the sounds in words. And I would show that parent how to honor invented spelling at this stage. But that's an important thing that would help Stephanie right away. So you can see that it's possible, even without a deep analysis of a running record, to get a sense of where your instruction needs to go and to get a sense of a reader, even if that reader isn't in your class. So there are definite benefits to taking running records. Let's talk through a few of them. First of all, they have a quick and informal feeling. You can take a running record on as few as 40 words. In kindergarten, there might be only 16, 20 words. You can take a running record on a few pages. You can take just a sampling. Running records are not graded, so students are less anxious and you get more valid results. Running records occur on the teacher's timeline when you have the time. So during independent reading, if you open your day with a period of 15 minutes of independent reading as students are coming in from breakfast, you can take running records there. During the familiar reading part of a guided reading lesson, when you first call a group to the table, the rest of the kids might be reading snippets of books you've read before with them in guided reading while you take one quick running record. You can take a really short running record while you're by a student's side during conferring time. They are not given whole class, so you don't have to set aside instructional time to do them. They happen during independent reading or at the beginning of guided reading. They facilitate communication, and they aren't mediated by standards or jargon. So you can talk to parents about them, and they understand, and they are impressed, as they should be, that you really know their student, their child. They provide immediate support for instructional planning, especially in these days we don't have M-Class, so we don't have some valuable information. We get a lot from NWEA, but nothing that can replace a daily running record for emergent readers K2, struggling readers K5, and even on-level readers 3-5 for benchmarking. They help you plan your lessons. Like with Stephanie, I know Stephanie needs help working through words. I'm going to have her sitting right up front during my interactive writing time. And finally, running records are easy and fun. They empower you as a teacher because you know more about a student after a running record than anybody on the planet does about them as a reader. And the students like them because they're right next to you, their teacher, the sun, moon, and stars. Now it's time to practice together. You'll need the How to Take a Running Record packet and the transcript of the Little Red Hen. Remember that none of us will be perfect at taking running records after this practice session. It is daily practice that makes the difference. So don't be discouraged. We'll all get there. First, let's talk briefly about the conventions, the marks we use. The YouTube videos will walk us through them one at a time. But just briefly, look at page 2 in the How to Take a Running Record packet. So you'll see that a correct response is marked with a check mark. A substitution, you put what the child said on top above the word that was in the text. An omission, you put a dash above the word that was left out. An insertion, you put the inserted word and put a dash under it because there was no word in the text. When a child makes multiple attempts at one word, you write each attempt above that word. Even though it only counts as one error, it gets you more information when you go to analyze it later. With repetitions, you write an uppercase R after the repeated word, and if they repeat a whole phrase, you put a bracket around the words that they repeat. If a child appeals to you, if they ask for help directly, or if they just look at you like, huh, you write a capital A above the line. If you end up telling them the word, you write a lowercase t beside the word under the line. And for self-corrections, you write SC in capitals after the corrected word, and I usually circle those because you're going to be counting them up later and you want to be able to find them. Okay, now it's time to transition to the first YouTube tab, Running Record Part 1, where we'll practice with accurate reading, substitutions, omissions, and insertions. You'll need the transcript of the Little Red Hen in front of you. During these tutorials, you'll take your running record to the right of the words and not on top of them. It's the only way over time to get better. When you go to the YouTube videos, you might want to speed the reading up a bit. The gal talks pretty slowly. You might want to go to the settings wheel in the lower right and switch from normal speed to 1.25. When each video practice reading snippet is done, you'll need to pause the video, let everyone catch up and clean up their running records, then hit play again to see if your marking was correct. Stop and exit the video, closing its tab, and go back to this presentation tab. Ready? Let's get going. Okay, so good job. Now we will practice coding for multiple attempts and tolds. In this video, they discuss the situation of completely muddled and confused running records. They talk about coding for try that again. This is a reading recovery convention that we don't worry about. If we get lost in a running record, we simply start over. So open your next YouTube tab, adjust the speed. When you're done, pause to let everyone catch up, and then listen to the correct answers. Exit the video, close the tab, and go back to this presentation to move on. Let's go. Well, how was that? I know you're doing great. You might take a brief break at this point or just march on through the last practice session. Now we'll practice coding for appeals, self-corrections, and repetitions. Go to the final YouTube tab, adjust the speed, pause to let everyone catch up at the end, and then listen to the correct answers. Let's go. Phew, okay, so that's taking a running record. Now on to scoring. We'll score just the section putting it all together, the last 4 sections of your YouTube practice. You might turn back to the packet, How to Take a Running Record, for a minute. Page 2 reminds us of what counts as an error. So a substitution, an omission, an incorrect attempt, an unsuccessful appeal, in other words, an appeal that led you to tell them, a told word, an insertion. Those are the kinds of errors. You won't count as errors self-corrections, repetitions, a correct attempt, a successful appeal, like if they appeal and then they get it, that's a correct response, and words pronounced differently in a child's dialect. So step 1 is getting an accuracy percentage, the percent of words read accurately. Page 3 gives the formula for accuracy percentage. Take a look at that for a minute. So first we need the total number of words that were read, the running words in this formula. You'll need to count those up. You'll also need to count up the number of errors because the formula for accuracy percentage is the number of words read minus the number of errors, which gives you the number of words read accurately. And then you divide the number of words read accurately by the total number of words read and multiply by 100 to get an accuracy percentage. So let's go on to calculate it. In the Put It Together section, there were 123 words read, and there were 6 errors. So, to figure out the accuracy percentage, we take the number of running words, 123, minus the number of errors, 6. We get 117, the number of words read accurately. We divide that by the total number of words read to get the percentage. So 117 divided by 123 times 100 equals 95. The accuracy percentage was 95%. This was easy, independent reading. Next, we calculate the self-correction rate. This number lets us know the degree to which students fix up their mistakes. The formula again is found on page 3. Please note that the handout has an error, though. The correct formula for error ratio is total errors plus, not divided by. So you'll need to change that. Total errors plus total self-corrections divided by total self-corrections. The way to think about this is that we look at the times the student goofed and did not fix it, the total errors, and we add the number of self-corrections, the times they did fix it, to get the total number of times that they had an opportunity to fix things. Then we divide the total number of times they had an opportunity to fix things by the number of times they actually did fix things to get the right number, the right side number in a ratio. So they fixed up 1 in however many errors. Ideally, we want a ratio of 1 to 3 or better. Ideally, kids fix up 1 out of every 3 mistakes, or even better, 1 out of every 2 mistakes, in other words, half the time, or 1 out of 1 mistake, fixing things up every time. In the Put It Together section, there were 6 errors and 2 self-corrections. So using the corrected formula, there were 8 times total that the student might have fixed things up. Out of those 8 opportunities to fix things up, they fixed things up twice. So the ratio is 1 to 4, and that's not good enough. We want 1 to 3 or better. Now on to analyzing to learn even more about the reader. We are going to use Stephanie's analyzed running record for this part. So pull that out, please. It's projected on the next slide, too. You all follow along on the analyzed running record as I talk you through my thinking. And we do this page by page. So for page 2, Stephanie said, "This house is mine," instead of "my home is here." So she had 3 errors. And you'll notice I put 3 tick marks in the E column off to the right. We're going to analyze each of those errors separately. Each tick mark, I write MSV next to it in the information used column for errors. And then I ask myself whether or not at the point of error, Stephanie's reading made sense, that's the M for meaning, sounded right, that's the S for structure of our language, and looked like the word on the page. That's the V for visual. So let's get started. She said "this" for my. Do we talk like that? Yes. So I circle structure, the S. Does that make sense to start a sentence? This? Yes, it does. So when Stephanie said "this" for my, it made sense and sounded right. I circle the MS. When she said "house," did that make sense and sound right? To say "this house"? Yes, it does. So I circled M and S, meaning and structure. I'm not going to circle V for visual all the way because house doesn't look exactly like home, right? But it does look a little bit. It has the first 2 letters that are the same. So I put a dotted line and an uppercase I for initial visual. She kind of matched the beginning of that word. And when she said mine for here, that made sense and sounded right. So I circle M and S. And then I draw a line. I'm on to the next page. On page 3, she did exactly the same thing. I'm going to analyze it exactly the same. That takes no time. So 3 tick marks, boom, 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 down the E column, MSV, MSV, MSV. This for mine, made sense and sounded right. I circle the M and S. House for home, made sense and sounded right. I circle the M and S. I put a dotted circle, maybe, around the V, and a capital I for initial, because she did match the words. The word she said does start like that, does start like the word home. And then mine for here, I circle the M and the S. They make sense and sounds right. Now I'm on a more interesting page. She started to do the very same thing. She said this for my, and then she appealed. Uh-oh. And then she looked at the teacher. The teacher said, you try it. And she self-corrected. A self-correct, I put the tick mark, the hash mark in the self-correct column, and I write 2 MSVs. I'm going to analyze what I think she was doing when she made the error, and I'm going to analyze what I think she was doing when she fixed it up. So we already have analyzed what we thought she was doing when she said this for my. She was trying to make things make sense and sound right. And when she fixed it up, I think she was using visual. I think she knows the word my. It is a sight word she knows, right? So I circled the V for visual, and I wrote down sight word because she wasn't working through the word. She just knew that word my. For house for home, that's the error she's been making all along. I put a tick mark in the E column, and I circle M and S and put that lowercase capital I to indicate that she used a little bit of initial visual. When she came to here, she's beginning to monitor right now on page 4. She's not the same reader she was on page 2 and 3. She's begun to realize, oh, holy cow, what I've been saying all along isn't right. And so she stops it here. She doesn't know here, but she has no strategies other than appealing to the teacher who tells her the word. You cannot analyze a told, so there is a tick mark for it, so you count up the correct number of errors, but you just leave that MSV sitting there. You don't circle anything. She didn't do anything. House for home on page 5, you know how to analyze that. You put the tick mark in the E column and you circle M and S because house for home makes sense and sounds right. If you wanted to, you can put the subscript capital I for initial visual. On page 6, she did something interesting. She said, oh, no. And then she said, no, it doesn't say that, because she knows the word a, for heaven's sake. She knows, or maybe she knows the word no and realized dog and no are not the same words. So she has begun to monitor, and she goes back to A. Even though she knows it, she's kind of freaked out at this point because she is not used to gluing herself to print and being an accountable reader who works through words. So she does her typical strategy of looking at the teacher, and she says, what is that? And the teacher says, you try it, because she knows that word and she gets it. So that is a self-correction. We put a tick mark in the self-correct column. We write 2 MSVs. We already know that when she said, oh no, she was just trying to make things make sense and sound right. So we circled M and S. But when she fixed it because she knew the sight word A. So I circled visual and I wrote sight word. When she said no, when she got dog, right? That was a self-correction too. She right away said, once she got A, she said a dog, and she fixed them both up. So again, a tick mark in the SC column, in the self-correct column, and I write 2 MSVs. We know when she said, oh no, that she was using meaning and structure, so I circle M and S. That makes sense and sounds right. When she fixed it up, I do not think she was working through that word dog. I'm not sure. She wasn't just using the picture of the dog on that page, and she had just said a dog. So I'm not going to give her the benefit of the doubt. We have not seen her work through words. We haven't seen her begin to get her mouth ready for those words. I think she was using meaning and structure again. So I circled meaning and structure. And finally, on page 7, house for home, we already know meaning and structure. And then finally, on page 8, she said, I see you. And then she said, no, that's not I. That's exactly what Stephanie does. Stephanie monitors for sight words, for whole words. She either knows them or she doesn't, like she monitored for A and she, that kind of thing. So anyway, she says, I see you. And then she says, no, that's not I. She goes back to reread, a fantastic strategy that we need to reinforce and name with her and compliment her explicitly on every single time we see her do it because it helps her. She says, oh, no, that's not I. She goes back and she does not know the word come. She appeals and the teacher tells her because she can't work through that word. So the teacher says, come. And then she self-corrects right away. Back, rabbit. My guess is she did not decode the word back. She did not decode the word rabbit. She used her memory for the story in the book intro that was given, which walked them all the way through the story. She was like, come back, rabbit. That's right. I know what that story's about. So there is only one error on that page, and that was the told for the word come. So you put a hash mark in the E column. When she said I for come, you can analyze that. It was an M and an S. She was using meaning and structure. She was telling a story. She self-corrected, C for back and U for rabbit. So that's 2 tick marks in the SC column. We write 2 sets of MSVs. When she said, I see you, right? When she actually made those errors, she was using meaning and structure. So I circle M and S in both of those self-corrections. And when she fixed them up, like I've said, I think she was using meaning and structure. I do not think she was using visual. So we have a picture of a reader in Stephanie who does not work through words, who is beginning to monitor, but she doesn't do it consistently. So we need to be on Stephanie and name and compliment explicitly those times that she pauses and say, that word, work through that word. And we need to prompt her to use the initial visual and what she knows about words to begin working through words. We also need to get her involved in daily writing because it's in writing that we can be sure that she has to work through words. You have no choice when you've got a pen in your hand. You've got to do that. So this running record for sure gave us information about our big goals with Stephanie. You have the strategy checklist that's pictured in this slide on the Google form to give you an idea of just what it is we're looking for. So with Stephanie, we had plenty of evidence about early reading behaviors. Her book handling was fine. She had one-to-one match. She could handle return sweep in more than one line of print, no problem at all. We know she read for meaning. We know she read for structure. We know using the visual cueing system was tough. The visual cueing system are the words on the page. She either knew the word or she didn't. There was, in terms of thinking within a text, that's where Stephanie is. Word solving is tough. She uses her knowledge of some sight words. So that's the first one. She does not predict text. In other words, she doesn't make an attempt at something if she doesn't know it. She isn't like, my nest, my house, my home. She doesn't make multiple attempts for sure. We don't see her using chunks in words. We don't see her using initial letter. That's the first thing she needs to start doing. Self-monitoring at the bottom of that page, she's just beginning to do it. The other page of the reading strategies checklist, asks about how does she think about a text and beyond a text. We don't have much evidence in this running record other than her retelling was adequate. She remembered the text and the key details in the text. So running records and the conversation about the text that happens afterward tell us a ton about our readers. Okay, that's analyzing. And analyzing is work. But in reality, it gets better, it gets easier. Number one, repeated errors, like you saw with Stephanie's running record, are usually analyzed the same way every time. So that gets real quick. Some students don't make many mistakes. So analyzing a running record with just a couple of errors, that's easy. You'll also get faster, so it'll get easier. And you don't have to analyze every running record this thoroughly. Shoot in the beginning for analyzing 1 out of every 3 running records. Take baby steps. But once you can do this, it'll become automatic enough so that you can sum up their queuing system use and their strategy use without marking all the MSVs in the circles, just by glancing down their errors, their miscues, and their self-corrections. You'll be able to sum up in writing everything that I just talked you through right at the top of your running record. One last thing, and a connection for those of you who are studying Every Child a Super Reader. One way to think about running records is that they are a researching teacher-student conference. Like any conference, you do some researching about how the student is doing, in this case by taking a running record. You compliment the student explicitly and briefly, and you make a quick teaching point. So let's talk about teaching points after the running record. Teaching points are few, 1 or 2, and they are brief. Teaching points often begin with explicit praise, especially of newly seen gains. So in Stephanie's case, I would explicitly praise the monitoring that she did on page 4, or the repetition to self-correct on page 6. Teaching points are based around strategies and behaviors that we want to see in the future. They are not about going back and fixing things up. So I'm not going to go to Stephanie and say, now on page 2, you goofed up this word. And okay, we got that one. Now on page 3, let's fix this one up. If that's what teaching points get to be about, if they get to feel to the student that they are about fixing things up, they'll be afraid of having you take a running record with them. They'll be like, this feels crummy. All that ends up happening is I have to laboriously go through and fix things. Fixing things doesn't matter, but learning strategies does. So teaching points are based around the strategies and behaviors. So with Stephanie, I'm going to make a teaching point about monitoring because she doesn't do it all the time. And I'm going to praise her and say, wow, what an awesome thing you did on page 6 when you noticed it didn't say that. How did you do that? She might not know. She might just say, I don't know how I did that. And I would say, you did it because you had your finger under that word and you know the word. You know the word a. And good readers do that. They think about words they know and they look for them. Like islands in a really choppy sea, they find those words they know. You're so smart, Stephanie. I want you to do that every time. Off you go. So they aren't about getting words correct. And teaching points often revisit bits of successful problem solving, and they name what the student did. That way it's more likely to happen again. Stephanie, is just beginning to monitor and self-correct. She certainly doesn't do it consistently. So I want to take her to that on page 6 where she monitored and she went back and reread. That might be my teaching point. Boy, on that page, you did something smart. Remember what you did? No, I have no idea what I did. Well, you noticed that it didn't say what you said, and you had your finger right there so you could look at it closely. That close work is what good readers do. And then you went back and you fixed it up, thinking about what would make sense, what would sound right, and what would look right. That's what I need to see all the time from you, Stephanie. Wow, how smart was that? Okay. So that's it for this training on running record. Thank you for your thoughtful presence. You absolutely rock. At this point, we're going to begin, I want you to go back to the Google form and answer reflection questions, essentially asking you to ask yourself, where does this practice intersect with what? Where does my next step and my practice in the classroom intersect with what was talked about today? What is my next step? And how ready am I to take that on? And is there anything you need to take that next step? So go back to the Google form and answer the reflection question. Then submit your reflection and you'll get an automatically generated PGP form emailed to you directly from me. So thank you for being the sun, moon, and stars for your kids. Happy kid watching. and blessed and powerful teaching to you.